Just to kind of kick it off, how did you kind of get your role in Chosen? Because when I was kind of doing my background research and everything, that was kind of one of the things I was wondering is how either were you approached or did you audition for the role?
It was interesting because the audition came to me at a time where I was taking a break in Florida, kind of burnt out with
Mhm.
auditioning and getting close and not getting the part, and kind of was just taking some time off. And a friend of mine was a casting associate with the office casting The Chosen, and she was just like, "I think you would be a good fit. Like, try auditioning for this character." And it's interesting because right before this character of Matthew, who's written as being neurodivergent,
Mhm.
I had also auditioned for another pilot for a network show where the main character was also neurodivergent. So I kind of dug up my notes and kind of went into it and just gave a read and just expected nothing of it. And then I got a call back and read for the director and his wife, who it makes they both together make big decisions on casting. And it was funny because during my audition, my camera froze. And so I started panicking in the during my read, and I'm doing
Yeah.
like looking all sideways, whatever. And I remember them saying like that was the moment where they felt like it was me as the character, Matthew, on the show. But I did not get the part first. Someone else was cast, and then I think a few days later, um, our showrunner and creator Dallas Jenkins' wife, Amanda Jenkins, just felt like she's like, I think you need to go with Paris, and that's the rest is history. So that's kind of how it first started for me. And 7 years later, here I am, still on it.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, that's kind of funny that it like worked out for you that your camera froze and the fact that it was
Yeah.
kind of online and it just worked for your character. And that actually kind of leads me perfectly into my next question, which is talking about your character, Matthew, because he is neurodivergent, and that is something that a lot of audiences and fans have kind of been able to relate to. What does that kind of representation mean to you coming onto kind of a really large television show to portray someone who is neurodivergent?
This role has been so meaningful to me and personally as well because I'm seeing the impact that portraying a character that is neurodivergent and seeing the audience really connect to him and see themselves in him, but also kind of being an ambassador to the neurodivergent community and trying to portray them in the most authentic way, but also showing them that they are accepted and they're seen. And I think through the show you're getting all of that. But what's more on top of that, what's more impactful for me is just being an Indian actor and being a lead on one of these shows is also giving representation to our community. And that's important to me too, because growing up, I never saw versions of myself on TV or film. And if they were, like they were the joke. So it's been cool to kind of represent both these communities through Matthew and really showing the world what it looks like to be accepted and really find yourself through his journey.
Yeah, and that's interesting because you kind of brought up the representation also of being Indian American. And as part of this conversation around representation, you're right. We do see a lot of Indian American, stereotypical characters on our television screens. And they were great to kind of just have as representation for a while. But then we kind of want to get into like the more meaty roles, right? Where we now have people like Maitreyi Ramakrishnan, who's on Never Have I Ever. And we're seeing these more non-stereotypical roles. Um, for Matthew, or just generally, how do you kind of bring your Indian American side into the representation that you're trying to bring into any of your characters right now, especially now that you're saying we're kind of getting into that realm of better representation for Indian American and South Asian characters on screen, if any?
Yeah, I kind of use it on and off screen, and by that I mean like through raising more awareness on my own platforms and social media. The show was, I guess, like pleasantly surprised, or they were just unaware of how big it was doing in India. And I remember, in season two, after the show went viral during the pandemic, the showrunner and one of our executives came up to me and they're like, India outside of Brazil is like the second largest market that's watching the show, and it just kept growing. And I think that's important because it's also showing that there is demand, there is an audience, and it kind of is hopefully showing other networks and streamers out there that they're, put us in these bigger roles because you'll see that we will bring in the audiences and it'll help us tell our stories that we want to tell as a community. So it's been pretty cool to kind of use that as a platform and kind of raise more awareness through social media and me just, educating my audience about my Indian side, whether it's, dressing up or just like showing Diwali or different holidays and stuff like that. It's all about, slowly just bringing yourself into these things and educating an audience because that's how, they learn. But also when it comes to Matthew, I just feel like a lot of his quirks, like the head, and sometimes I'll do different things, but it's just like my Indianness is engraved in me. I wear it with pride. I'm happy of my background. I'm big into Hindi film and the music and things like that. So it's just kind of it's just instilled in me. So I think when I'm portraying Matthew, it's just all there. But there are certain moments where whether it's just in mannerisms that I kind of can you can kind of see, oh, this is an Indian guy. And I like to joke that sometimes my accent kind of leans a little bit into the Indian accent more than the Middle Eastern, but I'm always trying my best to sound as authentically Middle Eastern as I can.
Yeah, and it's interesting you bring up like the head nod thing. I've been seeing that discussion kind of all over social media and TikTok
I
of
know I hate it. It was just like it's
it's
like this thing of like it's like I don't mean to do it, and then I'm like, crap, I just did the not because I don't, it's like everyone knows that it's like the way of saying yes and no, whatever. But
yeah.
like I try to avoid it, but it just comes out, and I'm like, man, that's because I'm brown. Like, yeah,
Yeah, it's really interesting kind of seeing that discussion all over social media too, just like the differences in head nods for South Asians versus everyone else. Um,
yeah,
I kind of love that discussion and how it's coming into a different realm because I always thought I was like the only person that did it, and then now I see other people do it and I feel seen. So I appreciate that.
yeah, no, exactly, yeah. And now you have Matthew on The Chosen who
Yeah.
occasionally does it. Yeah.
I love that. Was it difficult now you kind of talk about getting into the accent and kind of getting into your character. Was it difficult to kind of get into that accent? And did you have to work with a linguistic coach to kind of get into the Middle Eastern accent for yourself?
What's interesting is that a lot of I was acting for many years before like The Chosen was the biggest meatiest role I've gotten, but before that, um because like I think a lot of times in secular Hollywood they kind of have this one idea of what an Indian person looks like. So for me, who's more from like Gujarat and like the northern region, I think they had trouble placing me as like Indian in some of these roles. So I ended up reading for a lot of Middle Eastern roles, and that's where I on my own was like learning Arabic phrases and Farsi and just different things to kind of play the audition character that I was going up for.
Yeah.
And I think in that I found the dialect a little bit, but I think our first few seasons we did work with a coach, but I think by then I felt very comfortable with a Middle Eastern dialect. And then a lot of my good friends are Middle Eastern, so I kind of just listened to them, but they don't know it, but now they might. So but yeah, that's kind of what my process was with the dialect.
Okay, that's awesome. That's interesting that you're kind of talking about like I guess like the melding of representation that used to happen, especially in the early 2000s. I remember you would see a lot of Middle Eastern actors also play South Asian characters on screen as well, and vice versa. So that's interesting that you bring that up. I will say I did kind of look back on your filmography and I realized that I saw you in Duff, which I used to love when I was growing up. That was like
Oh
one of
yeah,
my favorite like teenage rom-com films. And I was like, oh my God,
yeah.
he was in that film. So that's interesting. You know, you have a really large filmography. If you could pick one character outside of Matthew that you feel like related to you the most, who would it be?
Oh wow, that's interesting because unfortunately, like a lot of the times, like I was just taking what I was getting, and there were some roles in there that really it was like roles that I was like, oh, I wouldn't have done this.
Yeah.
But I think you need to do those things to realize that and realize the power of you saying no. So
Mhm.
let me think about certain characters that I uh
We can also come
well
back
like
at the end.
what's
If you
that?
think we can come back to it at the end. If you want to think on it and then let me know, come back to it.
Yeah, no, I think like lately, like, I played like a very nice, charming guy on this film called The Shift, which I feel like is very wholesome. I do like Anupam from The Duff. He was very sweet and a little
Yeah,
bit nerdy, but that felt like I was filling a stereotype,
yeah,
unfortunately. But I think things have evolved into a better space now. The safest answer would probably be Kendall on Nashville, the aide.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, it's been interesting to navigate the different roles because I've looked at all that and I've looked at my body of work to see like where I've come now, and it's just interesting to be like, oh, these kind of roles shaped me for this moment. To be ready to also develop a thicker skin and to be able to say no to certain things. And I certainly use that now, and I don't regret it, but I think those were all like learning lessons for me when it comes to roles of my past.
Yeah, and I guess kind of moving into the roles of your future, what if you could kind of craft a well, represented role for yourself in any sort of kind of dream world for you, right? What would those characteristics be for your character? Like, what would his personality type be like? What would you hope that they would be able to like achieve? If you could kind of craft a dream role
Yeah.
for yourself, who would it be?
Oh, Malika, that's a good question. I always say listen, ever since I was 5 years old, my mom every Friday night would come back from the Indian store with some like chaat masala and the newest Bollywood film
Yeah.
in hand. I grew up with that. I grew up with that feeling of bigger than emotional, like love, sadness, and things like that. And my first love for film was through the Hindi film industry. So I would love to play like an Indian American lead in a rom-com or something that's specific to our story that tells the South Asian community story. My parents came here from the 70s and 80s, like in the late 70s, early 80s, to start a new life out here,
Mm.
sacrificing a lot of their own wishes and dreams for us, for their family. And I think it's an interesting story to tell, like how we all came here as a community, and like there's a lot of things that I read that I think are very fascinating to me that could be developed into something that could be lighthearted, but also telling more of our stories, opening up our spaces so people can see who we are as a community and not just those stereotypes, because I think like in the period of the American dream, like everyone thought that Indians were automatically successful, but that's not how it worked. We came here with nothing. A lot of us came here with nothing. And
Yeah.
so it's about building yourself from ground up and really showing the world, like, the resilience that we have. And then also I'm a former dancer, so I got to incorporate the Bhangra Ras in me and
Yeah.
do some kind of, yeah. So there's a story in there somewhere, but yeah, I would love to play one of those romantic leads that has a message at the end for the world to consume.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting conversation because I've seen this kind of be brought up within South Asian media spaces and social media spaces as well, which is why do we never see two South Asian leads with each other in a rom-com? We've never seen that really, except for one, which was I think the wedding season on Netflix. And
Yeah,
the conversation always comes back to, well, there is Bollywood, you kind of already have that, but we kind of want it for the people that have born and raised here because we kind of have a mix of both worlds, and we would always love to see two South Asian leads in a rom-com or even like a thriller. That would be amazing to kind of see two South Asian leads do that instead of just one, even though one is amazing and we kind of have that representation. It would be awesome to see two. So yeah, I think that would always be amazing to just kind of get through to directors and producers and see that. So those were,
yeah, sorry, go ahead.
no, no, go ahead.
No, I totally agree with you. And I think it just comes with this thing because obviously like it's called show business for a reason, right? So I think when it comes to that, they just see like what will draw more audiences in, but it's like they haven't really taken the risk to show a true South Asian lead. Yeah, you're right. It's usually kind of mixed and they're trying to put different pieces in and work it out if they have one South Asian lead and
Yeah.
that. But I think if they really take that risk or or just even just take a chance, then they'll be surprised. And there are stuff that is out there. I've just seen some things recently where the leads are both South Asian, so that's very exciting for me to see. It's like, okay, this new generation that's coming through is gonna be able to, get these opportunities, and I think that's great. But yeah, I truly believe that they just really need. I think it's like just a lesson in there's no risk without reward, or there's no reward
Yeah.
without risk.
Yeah, no, totally. I 100% agree. And I think now is kind of that major time where people can put that risk into two South Asian lead actors, which I think would be amazing to see on screen. So hopefully it happens soon.
Yeah,
Um,
fingers crossed. Maybe I'll be talking to you about it next
I
time with
know,
someone.
that'd be great.
Yeah.